The day Rowan Creed paid $50 for another human being, he thought he understood darkness. He'd killed men in the war. He'd watched friends die screaming in mud. But nothing prepared him for the moment a father looked him dead in the eye and offered to sell his own daughter like a broken horse outside a feed store in Blackthorn Ridge. This is a story about two people the world threw away and how they clawed their way back from nothing. If you want to see where broken souls go when there's nowhere left to fall, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The morning Rowan Creed's life changed forever started like any other godforsaken Tuesday in late October. Cold enough to see your breath, not cold enough to justify staying indoors. The kind of weather that made a man's joints ache and his patience thin. Rowan had come down from his mountain cabin to Blackthorn Ridge for supplies, nothing more. Salt pork, coffee, ammunition, lamp oil, the usual list. He wasn't looking for conversation. He sure as hell wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found him anyway. He was tying his horse outside Mackenzie's feed and grain when he heard the voice. Desperate, shaking, the kind of desperation that made Rowan's instincts prickle. "Please, I'm begging you, just listen." Rowan turned. A man stood there, mid-50s, maybe older, weathered like old leather left too long in the sun. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly known better days. Hands trembling, eyes darting. The stink of cheap whiskey rolled off him in waves. "Not interested," Rowan said flatly. "You don't even know what I'm offering." "Don't care." The man stepped closer, too close. Rowan's hand moved instinctively toward the knife on his belt. "I got something valuable," the man insisted. "Real valuable, worth way more than I'm asking." "Move along." $50. Rowan laughed, a short, harsh sound. $50 for what? Magic beans? The man glanced over his shoulder, then back at Rowan. His voice dropped to something just above a whisper. "My daughter." The words hung in the cold air between them like smoke. Rowan went very still. "Say that again." "My daughter. She's 20 years old, healthy, good with her hands, cooks, cleans, sews, doesn't complain, doesn't talk back. $50, and she's yours." For a long moment, Rowan just stared at him. Then his hand shot out and grabbed the man by the collar, slamming him back against the wooden post of the storefront. "You drunk son of a bitch! I'm serious!" The man didn't fight back, didn't even try to pull away, just stood there, shaking. "I'm dead serious. I need the money. I need it bad. And she ain't got no future with me anyway. At least with you, she'd have a roof, food. You look like you got money." Rowan tightened his grip. "I should break your jaw." "Then do it. Won't change nothing. I already tried selling her to 3 other men this week. Somebody's going to take the offer. Question is whether it's you or Vernon Hayes." That name made Rowan's blood run cold. Vernon Hayes, a rancher 20 miles east with a reputation that made decent people cross the street. Rowan had heard stories, the kind of stories that involved locked rooms and women who didn't come back the same. "You're lying," Rowan said, though he could already feel the trap closing. "I wish I was." The man's voice cracked. "Vernon said he'd come back tomorrow with the money, said he'd take her whether I agreed or not if I didn't have his whiskey debt paid by Friday. This way at least I get something out of it, and maybe she gets something better than Vernon." Rowan released him with a shove. The man stumbled but caught himself. "Where is she?" The man pointed across the street. "Sitting on the bench outside the telegraph office." Rowan looked, and there she was. A young woman in a faded brown dress that had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish from the patches. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that needed washing. Thin, not just slender, but genuinely underfed. The kind of thin that spoke to years of not quite enough food. She sat perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. No, not nothing. She was peeling an apple with a small knife, slowly, methodically. The peel came off in one long spiral that she let fall to the dirt at her feet. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the people passing by, just kept peeling with the kind of empty focus people get when they've learned that paying attention to the world only brings pain. "Her name's Lydia," the man said quietly. "Lydia Voss. She's a good girl, quiet, doesn't cause trouble." "Doesn't cause trouble," Rowan repeated, his voice flat. "You mean you beat the trouble out of her?" The man flinched, but didn't deny it. Rowan felt something dark and familiar rising in his chest. He'd seen this before. During the war, after the war, people selling people, desperation turning human beings into currency. He told himself he was done with that world, done with the ugliness. That's why he'd gone to the mountains, to get away from this exact kind of rot. I need an answer, Virgil Voss pressed. Vernon's coming tomorrow. Rowan wanted to walk away, wanted to climb back on his horse and ride back up the mountain and forget this conversation ever happened. But he kept seeing that girl, that empty expression, those mechanical movements, and he kept thinking about Vernon Hayes. Does she know? Rowan asked. About this? She knows. And? Virgil's laugh was bitter. She ain't said a word about it. That's how she is, just accepts things. Rowan looked at the girl again. As if sensing his attention, she glanced up. Their eyes met across the dusty street. There was nothing in her gaze. No plea, no hope, no fear, just a kind of vast, terrible resignation. The look of someone who'd already made peace with whatever hell was coming next. That look decided it. Rowan reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He counted out $50 in silver coins and dropped them into Virgil's shaking hands. She comes with me right now, Rowan said. Whatever she owns, she takes. You don't follow. You don't come asking for more. You don't speak to her or about her ever again. If I see you anywhere near my property, I'll kill you. We clear? Virgil nodded, clutching the money like a drowning man clutching driftwood. We're clear. Then get the hell out of my sight. Virgil backed away, stumbled, caught himself, and disappeared into the saloon across the street. Rowan stood there for a moment, hating himself, hating the choice he'd just made, hating that it was probably still the right one. Then he walked across the street. Lydia didn't look up as he approached, just kept peeling her apple. Up close, Rowan could see the details. The scar across her left eyebrow, the way her dress hung too loose around her shoulders, the bruises on her wrist that she'd tried to cover with the sleeves. Your father sold you to me, Rowan said. No point in sugarcoating it. I know. Her voice was quiet, flat. She set down the half-peeled apple and wiped the knife on her dress. Are we leaving now? Do you have belongings? Not much. Go get them. She stood slowly, as if testing whether this was some kind of trick. When Rowan didn't move or speak, she walked to a small canvas bag tucked behind the bench and picked it up. That was it. Everything she owned in the world fit in a bag smaller than a flour sack. That's all? Rowan asked. That's all. He gestured toward his horse. You can ride. I'll walk. I can walk too. It's a long way. You'll ride. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, but she didn't argue. Rowan helped her up onto the horse, and she settled into the saddle like someone who'd done it before, but not recently. They left Blackthorn Ridge in silence. The mountain trail took 3 hours on foot. Rowan led the horse while Lydia rode in silence. She didn't ask questions, didn't make conversation, just sat there swaying slightly with the horse's movement, staring at the trees. About halfway up, Rowan stopped at a creek to let the horse drink. You should drink too, he said, not looking at her. Lydia slid down from the saddle and knelt by the water. She drank with her hands cupped, quick and efficient. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and finally spoke. What do you want from me? The question was so direct it caught Rowan off guard. What? You paid $50. She said it like a simple fact. What do you want in exchange? Rowan felt something twist in his gut. She was asking what kind of hell she'd just bought herself into. Asking what he expected, asking how bad it was going to be. Nothing you're thinking, he said roughly. She looked at him then, really looked, studying his face like she was trying to decide if he was lying. Men don't pay $50 for nothing, she said quietly. I didn't pay for you. I paid to keep Vernon Hayes from getting his hands on you. Why? Because Vernon Hayes is a bastard who hurts women for fun, and your father's a coward who would have sold you to him tomorrow. Lydia absorbed this without reaction. So what happens now? Now you come to my cabin. There's a spare room. You can have it. I'll teach you to shoot, to hunt if you want. You'll earn your keep by cooking and mending, same as anyone would. When spring comes, if you want to leave, I'll take you to the next town over and give you enough money to start somewhere new. If you want to stay, you stay. Your choice. She stared at him for a long moment. You're serious? I'm serious. Why? That question again. Rowan didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he had too many answers and none of them were simple enough to explain to a stranger. Because I've done enough bad things in my life, he said finally. Didn't feel like adding this to the list. Lydia nodded slowly. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't look quite as empty as before either. Okay. Okay? I'll try it. If you're lying, I'll figure it out soon enough. There was something almost defiant in the way she said it, a tiny spark of self-preservation that hadn't been completely beaten out of her. Rowan almost smiled. Fair enough. Let's keep moving. We've got another hour before dark. They continued up the mountain. The cabin appeared through the trees just as the sun started to dip below the ridgeline. It wasn't much. Single story, rough-cut logs, a stone chimney that leaked smoke when the wind blew wrong, but it was solid, dry, warm enough in winter if you kept the fire going. Rowan had built it himself 7 years ago after mustering out of the army, after deciding that civilization and all its complications could go straight to hell. Lydia slid down from the horse without being told. She stood there looking at the cabin with an expression Rowan couldn't read. It's not fancy, he said. I didn't expect fancy. He led the horse to a small lean-to shelter and started removing the saddle. Lydia followed and watched silently. You know how to handle horses? Rowan asked. Some. My father had 2 before he sold them. You can help with this one then. His name's Soot. He's mean to strangers, but he'll warm up. Okay. They worked together in silence, unsaddling the horse and rubbing him down. Lydia's movements were careful, hesitant, like she was waiting for Rowan to snap at her for doing something wrong. When Soot was settled, Rowan nodded toward the cabin. Come on, I'll show you inside. The interior was sparse. One main room with a fireplace, a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a ladder leading to a sleeping loft above. In the back, a smaller room with a bed and a trunk. That's yours, Rowan said, pointing to the back room. Door latches from the inside. I won't come in unless you ask. Lydia stepped into the room and set down her bag. She touched the bed frame, actual wood, with a straw mattress and wool blankets, like she couldn't quite believe it was real. This is mine? She asked quietly. It's yours. She turned to look at him. Where will you sleep? Loft. He gestured upward. I've been sleeping up there for years. No reason to change now. Lydia nodded slowly. She was still looking at him like he might suddenly reveal this was all a cruel joke. Are you hungry? Rowan asked. The question seemed to startle her. Yes. I'll make something. Come out when you're ready. He left her there and set about building a fire in the hearth. By the time she emerged 15 minutes later, he had a pot of stew warming and coffee brewing. She hovered near the doorway, uncertain. Sit, Rowan said, nodding toward the table. She sat. He ladled stew into 2 bowls and set one in front of her along with a hunk of bread. Then he poured coffee into 2 tin cups and sat down across from her. Lydia stared at the food. Something wrong? Rowan asked. No, I haven't had this much food at once in a long time. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, without self-pity, made Rowan's jaw tighten. Eat as much as you want. There's plenty. She picked up the spoon carefully, like it might break. Took a small bite. Then another. Then she started eating faster, trying to maintain some dignity, but clearly struggling not to just shovel it in. Rowan pretended not to notice. He ate his own meal and stared at the fire. When she'd finished every drop in her bowl and most of the bread, Lydia set down her spoon. Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome. Silence settled between them. Not entirely comfortable, but not hostile either. Can I ask you something? Lydia said. Go ahead. What did you do? Before you came here? Rowan considered how much to tell her, decided on the truth. I was a soldier, fought in the war, did some trapping after. Then I came here to be left alone. Did it work? Did what work? Being left alone. Did it help? That question hit deeper than Rowan expected. He thought about the years of silence, the long winters, the way sound carried differently when you were the only person for miles. Sometimes, he said honestly. Not always. Lydia nodded like that made sense to her. I used to think about running away, she said, Just disappearing into the woods, living alone where nobody could find me. Why didn't you? Didn't know how to survive on my own. Figured I'd just die slower that way instead of all at once. The casual way she talked about dying made something cold settle in Rowan's chest. You're not going to die here, he said firmly. You don't know that. I do, because I won't let it happen. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, wiping at her face with the back of her hand. Sorry, she whispered. I don't know why I'm... Don't apologize. You don't have to apologize for anything here. The tears kept coming anyway, quiet, almost silent, like she'd learned a long time ago how to cry without making noise. Rowan stood and walked to the shelf where he kept a few spare cloths. He handed one to her without comment, then busied himself clearing the table to give her privacy. By the time he'd washed the bowls and put away the remaining stew, she'd composed herself. I should sleep, she said, her voice still rough. It's been a long day. Good idea. If you need anything during the night, I'm right up there. He gestured to the loft. Okay? She stood and walked to her room, paused at the doorway. Rowan? Yeah? Thank you for earlier, for not being Vernon Hayes. She closed the door before he could respond. Rowan stood there in the firelight, listening to the soft sound of the latch clicking into place. He'd bought a human being today. The thought made him sick, but he'd also saved her from something worse. He told himself that had to count for something. Walter. The first few days were strange. Lydia moved through the cabin like a ghost. She woke before dawn, made breakfast without being asked, and cleaned obsessively. Every surface, every corner. She mended Rowan's torn shirts and patched his worn trousers and organized his supplies with an efficiency that bordered on compulsive. You don't have to do all this, Rowan said on the third morning, watching her scrub the floor. I know. Then why are you? She didn't look up. Because I need to be useful. You are useful. I need to prove it. There was something desperate in the way she said it. Like if she stopped moving, stopped working, stopped being valuable, the ground would open up and swallow her whole. Rowan recognized that feeling. He'd felt it himself after the war, that constant need to justify your existence, to earn the right to keep breathing. Lydia. She paused, still kneeling on the floor. Look at me. Slowly, she raised her eyes. You don't have to prove anything, Rowan said. You're here because you deserve to be here, not because you work hard enough or clean well enough or any other reason. You're here because you're a human being and you deserve a safe place to sleep. Understand? She stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. I don't know how to do that. Do what? Just exist without earning it. The honesty in her voice broke something in Rowan. Then we'll figure it out together, he said quietly. But I need you to stop apologizing every time I walk into a room. And I need you to eat more than half a bowl of stew at dinner. And I need you to understand that you're allowed to rest. Lydia's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the floor. What if I can't? Then we'll start smaller, but we're going to try. She nodded, slow, uncertain. Okay. Okay. She went back to scrubbing, but something in her posture had shifted. Just slightly, like maybe, possibly, she was starting to believe him. Wakang. A week passed, then 2. The mountain settled into early winter. Frost on the windows in the morning, snow dusting the pine trees, the kind of cold that made the world feel smaller and quieter. Rowan fell into a routine with Lydia. He'd wake first, start the fire, and make coffee. She'd come out shortly after, and they'd eat breakfast together in comfortable silence. Then Rowan would head out to check his trap lines while Lydia stayed at the cabin. At first, he'd been worried about leaving her alone, but she seemed to prefer it. The solitude gave her space to breathe without feeling watched. One afternoon, Rowan came back early and found her sitting on the porch steps with a book, the old cracked one from her bag. "What are you reading?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "Just a collection of poems. My mother's. She died when I was 12. Can I hear one?" Lydia hesitated, then she read aloud a short piece about winter birds and survival. Her voice was soft but clear. When she finished, Rowan nodded. "Your mother had good taste." She was the only good thing in my life for a long time. Tell me about her. So she did, haltingly at first, then with more confidence. She talked about a woman who'd tried to shield her children from their father's temper, who'd taught Lydia to read by candlelight, who died of pneumonia one February because Virgil refused to pay for a doctor. Rowan listened without interrupting. When she finished, there were tears on her cheeks again. But this time she didn't apologize for them. She would have liked you, Lydia said quietly. My mother. She would have said you were one of the good ones. I'm not sure that's true. It is. I can tell. They sat together on the porch until the sun started to set and the cold drove them back inside. That night, Lydia asked if she could learn to shoot. The question surprised Rowan. Why? He asked. Because I never want to be helpless again. There was steel in her voice, a determination that hadn't been there before. Rowan studied her, this thin, quiet woman who'd survived hell and come out the other side still fighting. All right, he said. We'll start tomorrow morning. Her smile was small but genuine. Thank you. Nice. Teaching Lydia to shoot was harder than Rowan expected. Not because she was incapable, she picked up the basics quickly enough, but because she'd spent so many years learning to make herself small and invisible that holding a rifle and standing her ground felt physically wrong to her. Stop apologizing when you miss, Rowan said on the third day, watching her lower the rifle with a grimace. Sorry, she caught herself. I mean, I'll try. You're flinching before you pull the trigger. That's why you're shooting low. I know. So stop flinching. I'm trying. Rowan moved to stand beside her. What are you afraid of? The noise. The kick. The rifle's not going to hurt you. I know that in my head. But not in your body. No. Rowan understood. Fear lived in the body. It didn't matter what your brain knew if your muscles had learned to expect pain. Try this, he said. Before you shoot, take a breath. Hold it. Then pull the trigger on the exhale. Don't think about the noise, just focus on the target. Lydia nodded and raised the rifle again. Breathe in, hold, exhale. The shot rang out. This time it hit the tree trunk they'd been aiming at. Not center, but close enough. Lydia lowered the rifle and stared at the tree like she couldn't quite believe it. I hit it. You did? I actually hit it. Told you. You're stronger than you think. She turned to look at him, and for the first time since they'd met, there was something like pride in her expression. They practiced until her shoulder was bruised and her hands were shaking from cold, but she never asked to stop. Winter deepened. The snow came in earnest, transforming the mountain into something stark and beautiful. The cabin became an island in a white sea. Rowan taught Lydia how to maintain the trap lines, how to skin rabbits and cure meat, how to read weather patterns in the clouds. She absorbed it all with fierce concentration. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire. Sometimes Lydia would read from her book. Sometimes Rowan would tell stories about his time in the army, the ones that weren't too dark, the ones that had some humor in them. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Not quite friendship, not quite family, something in between. One night, Lydia looked up from her sewing. Can I ask you something personal? Rowan glanced at her. Depends on the question. Why did you really leave the army? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down the knife he'd been sharpening. I killed a lot of people in the war, he said. Some of them deserved it. Some of them probably didn't. After a while, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. So I left before I became something I couldn't live with. Do you regret it? Leaving? No, but I regret what it took to get me there. Lydia nodded slowly. I think that makes sense. What about you? Rowan asked. If you could go back and change one thing about your life, what would it be? She didn't even hesitate. I'd have run away the day after my mother died, before I learned to be afraid. You're not afraid anymore? I'm still afraid. I'm just learning to do things anyway. Rowan smiled. That's called courage. Feels more like stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Lydia laughed, a real laugh, not bitter or hollow. The sound filled the cabin like light. Rowan realized he'd do just about anything to hear that sound again. December arrived with a vengeance. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid overnight. Rowan and Lydia spent most of their time inside, keeping the fire burning and the cabin warm. One morning, Rowan was repairing a crack in the wall near the door when Lydia spoke up from the table. "What do you need from town?" Rowan paused, hammer in hand. "What?" "We're running low on coffee and flour, and you mentioned needing more ammunition. I was thinking about what you'd need when you make the next trip down." It was such a simple, practical question, but it was also the first time she'd asked him what he needed instead of just waiting to be told what to do. "I hadn't thought about it yet," Rowan said. "Well, when you do, let me know. I can make a list." She said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But Rowan saw what it really was. It was her taking ownership, caring about the cabin not just as a place she was staying, but as a home she was helping to maintain. "I will," he said. "Thank you." Lydia nodded and went back to her sewing. Rowan returned to hammering, but something had shifted in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. That night, a blizzard hit. The wind howled like something alive, rattling the shutters and driving snow through every crack in the walls. Rowan stuffed rags into the gaps while Lydia kept the fire burning high. Around midnight, the chimney started making an ominous creaking sound. "That's not good," Rowan muttered. "What's wrong?" "Ice buildup, probably. If it gets bad enough, the whole thing could come down." "Can you fix it?" "Not until the storm passes." They sat together, listening to the wind scream. The cabin felt very small and very fragile. "Are we going to die?" Lydia asked. She didn't sound panicked, just curious. "No, I've survived worse storms than this." "Have you?" 3 years ago, I was snowed in for 2 weeks. Ran out of food on day 9. Had to eat boiled leather from my boots." Lydia's eyes widened. "You're joking." "I wish I was. Tasted like sadness and regret." She laughed, then clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. "I shouldn't be laughing. We might actually die." "We're not going to die, but if we do, at least you'll die laughing." That made her laugh harder. Soon she was doubled over, gasping, tears streaming down her face. Rowan found himself laughing too, deep, genuine laughter that shook his whole body. When they finally calmed down, Lydia wiped her eyes. "I haven't laughed like that in years," she said. "Me neither." "Thank you, Rowan." "For what?" "For making the end of the world feel less scary." The chimney groaned again, but neither of them moved. They just sat there by the fire, listening to the storm rage outside, and for once it didn't feel like the world was ending at all. The storm passed by morning. Rowan climbed onto the roof to inspect the chimney and found significant damage. It would take days to repair properly. "Can we still use the fireplace?" Lydia called up from below. "For now, but I'll need to rebuild part of the stonework before the next big storm." "I can help." Rowan looked down at her. "You know how to work with stone?" "No, but I can learn," he smiled. "All right, we'll start tomorrow." They spent the next week working on the chimney. Lydia proved to be a quick study, mixing mortar and placing stones with careful precision. Her hands were small but strong. One afternoon, as they were finishing up, Rowan slipped on a patch of ice near the roof's edge. His feet went out from under him, and he slid straight toward the drop. Lydia screamed his name. Rowan managed to grab the gutter at the last second, stopping his fall. But his weight pulled part of the rotten wood free, and he crashed through the porch overhang below, landing hard on the steps in a shower of splintered wood. For a moment, he just lay there, stunned. Then he heard Lydia's boots crunching through the snow as she ran around the side of the cabin. "Rowan, are you—" She stopped, looked at him lying in the wreckage of the porch steps, looked at the destroyed overhang, looked back at him, and started laughing. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter, full, unrestrained, belly-deep laughter. Rowan stared at her. "I could be dying." "You're—" She could barely get the words out. "You're fine. You landed on your ass. But the way you—" More laughter. Despite the pain radiating through his back, Rowan found himself grinning. "Glad I could entertain you." "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, it's just—" She dissolved into laughter again. Rowan sat up slowly, testing his limbs. Nothing broken, just bruised pride and a sore tailbone. "Help me up?" Lydia extended a hand, still giggling. Rowan took it and let her pull him to his feet. They stood there in the snow, looking at the destroyed porch. Well, Rowan said, I guess we're rebuilding that too. I guess so. Lydia was still smiling, a real, genuine, unguarded smile. And in that moment, Rowan realized something that made his chest tight. The lonely mountain didn't feel lonely anymore. Done. Winter held on into February, but the worst of it had passed. The cabin had been transformed. New chimney, new porch, small improvements everywhere that made it feel less like a survival shelter and more like a home. Lydia had changed too. She still had quiet days when old ghosts seemed to haunt her, but they were fewer now. She spoke more, smiled more, moved through the cabin with something approaching confidence. One evening she was washing dishes when she spoke without looking at Rowan. I've been thinking about spring. Yeah? You said I could leave when spring came, if I wanted. Rowan's hand stilled on the wood he was carving. That's right. Do you want me to leave? The question hit him harder than he expected. No, he said honestly, but that doesn't mean you should stay if you don't want to. Lydia set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. I want to stay, if that's all right with you. Relief flooded through Rowan so strong it almost made him dizzy. It's more than all right. Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden. Lydia, you're the furthest thing from a burden. You've made this place better in every possible way. She smiled, shy but genuine. You've made my life better too. I didn't think that was possible anymore. They looked at each other across the cabin. Two broken people who'd somehow managed to piece each other back together. Then it's settled, Rowan said. You stay as long as you want. Okay. Okay. Lydia went back to washing dishes. Rowan went back to carving, but something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was real. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Rowan felt something dangerous and unfamiliar blooming in his chest. Hope. Spring came late to the mountain that year, arriving in reluctant stages like an unwelcome guest testing the threshold. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth and dead grass underneath. Ice broke free from the creek with sounds like gunshots echoing through the valley. The air warmed just enough to make the mornings bearable without 3 layers of wool. Lydia had been at the cabin for 4 months now. 4 months that felt simultaneously like a lifetime and no time at all. She stood at the window one morning in early March, watching Rowan check the trap lines in the distance. He moved through the trees with the easy confidence of someone who knew every root and rock on this mountain. She'd learned to read his moods by the set of his shoulders. Today, they were relaxed. That meant the traps had yielded something worthwhile. The cabin smelled like coffee and wood smoke. Lydia had baked bread that morning, her 3rd attempt, and the first one that didn't come out either burnt or raw in the middle. She'd been teaching herself to cook properly, using the supplies Rowan brought back from town and a lot of trial and error. He ate everything she made without complaint, even the disasters, but she could tell when something actually turned out well by the way he'd go back for seconds without being prompted. She heard his boots on the porch and turned from the window. Rowan came in carrying 2 rabbits and what looked like a grouse. He hung them on the hooks by the door and brushed snow from his shoulders. Good haul, Lydia said. Creek's thawing. Animals are moving again. He pulled off his gloves and moved toward the fire to warm his hands. Smells good in here. I made bread. Real bread this time, not whatever that brick was last week. That brick wasn't so bad. You're a terrible liar. Rowan smiled. Fair enough. The bread looks good, though. Lydia cut him a thick slice and watched as he tried it. His eyebrows went up slightly. This is actually good. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm impressed. There's a difference. Something warm bloomed in Lydia's chest at the casual praise. She was still getting used to that, the way Rowan noticed things. Small things. The way he acknowledged effort without making it feel like she was performing for approval. I was thinking, she said, sitting down across from him at the table, about the garden. What about it? You mentioned last month that you used to grow vegetables on the south side of the cabin, before you decided it was too much work for one person. I did mention that. Well, there's 2 of us now, and I've been reading that book you brought back from town, the one about mountain farming. I think I could get something growing. Potatoes, at least. Maybe carrots, some herbs. Rowan was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. That south wall gets good sun, he said. Soil's decent if you work it right. You'd need to clear the rocks and build a fence to keep the deer out. I can do that. It's hard work. I'm not afraid of hard work. He studied her across the table. No, you're not. So I can try? You don't need my permission, Lydia. This is your home, too. Your home, too. The words settled over her like a warm blanket. All right, then, she said. I'll start clearing tomorrow. I'll help. 2 sets of hands will make it faster. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. They looked at each other for a beat longer than necessary. Then Lydia stood and busied herself cutting more bread, trying to ignore the flush creeping up her neck. The truth was, somewhere in the last 4 months, something had shifted between them. It was subtle, unspoken, but it was there in the way Rowan made sure she had the warmest blanket on cold nights, in the way Lydia mended his clothes without being asked, in the comfortable silences that stretched between them while they worked side by side. It terrified her, because caring about someone meant they could hurt you, and Lydia had promised herself after leaving her father's house that she'd never give anyone that kind of power over her again. But Rowan wasn't like anyone she'd known before. He kept his promises. He gave her space when she needed it, and company when she didn't want to be alone. He never raised his voice, never made her feel small, never used his size or strength to intimidate. Still, Lydia caught herself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the mask to slip, for the real Rowan to emerge, angry, controlling, cruel. Except it never happened, and that was somehow more frightening than if it had. Ishikan. They spent the next week clearing the garden plot. The work was exactly as hard as Rowan had warned, backbreaking, tedious, endless. The ground was still partially frozen in places, and rocks seemed to multiply overnight, but Lydia attacked it with grim determination. You're going to hurt yourself, Rowan said on the 3rd day, watching her wrestle with a boulder twice her size. I've got it. Lydia, Chiku, I said I've got it. She didn't have it. The boulder didn't budge, and she nearly threw out her back trying. Rowan stepped in without a word and helped her lever it free, using a long piece of wood as a pry bar. Together they rolled it to the edge of the clearing. Thank you, Lydia muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? You say that like it's a bad thing. Didn't say it was bad, just making an observation. Lydia straightened and looked at him. Really looked. His hair was getting longer, curling slightly at his collar. There was dirt on his face and his hands were scraped raw from the work, but his eyes were calm, patient. Why do you put up with me? She asked suddenly. The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean? I'm difficult. I don't listen. I work myself half to death over things that don't matter. Why don't you just tell me to stop? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on the boulder they'd just moved and gestured for her to sit beside him. She did. You want the truth? He asked. Always. You remind me of myself. After the war, I couldn't sit still, couldn't rest. Had to keep moving, keep working, keep proving I was still useful. It took me 2 years before I could sleep through the night without waking up in a panic. Lydia absorbed this. Do you still have nightmares? Sometimes. Less than I used to. What do you dream about? Things I can't change? People I couldn't save. He glanced at her. What about you? Lydia looked down at her hands, dirt under the fingernails, calluses forming on her palms. I dream that I'm back in my father's house, that none of this was real, that I wake up and I'm still there, still hungry, still waiting for the next beating. That won't happen. You can't promise that. I can promise that I'll fight like hell to make sure it doesn't. Something in his voice made Lydia's throat tight. She blinked hard against the sudden sting of tears. I believe you, she said quietly. They sat together on the boulder, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The sun was starting to dip below the tree line, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. We should head in, Rowan said eventually. It'll be dark soon. Just a few more minutes. All right, a few more minutes. They stayed until the first stars appeared. By the end of March, the garden plot was ready. Lydia had ordered seeds from town through Rowan, potatoes, carrots, beans, herbs. She planted them with meticulous care, following the instructions in the farming book like they were gospel. What if they don't grow? she asked one evening, staring at the freshly turned earth. Then we try again next year, Rowan said. But what if I did something wrong? Lydia, you followed every step in that book twice over. If they don't grow, it won't be because you did something wrong. Sometimes things just don't work out. That's not very reassuring. It's honest. She shot him a look. You're supposed to tell me everything will be fine. Everything will be fine either way. We're not going to starve if the garden fails. But I think it's going to work. Why? Because you care about it. Things tend to grow when someone actually gives a damn. Lydia felt that warmth in her chest again. The dangerous one. You think I'm going to be a good gardener? I think you're good at everything you set your mind to, even when you pretend you're not. She looked away, embarrassed by the compliment. I'm not good at everything. Name one thing you're not good at. Accepting compliments, apparently. Rowan laughed. Fair point. They stood together looking at the garden in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The evening air smelled like pine sap and thawing earth. Rowan? Yeah? I'm glad I stayed. He didn't respond right away. When she glanced at him, his expression was unreadable. I'm glad you stayed too, he said finally. April brought rain. Endless, drumming, relentless rain that turned the mountain trails to mud and kept them trapped inside for days at a time. Lydia discovered she didn't mind. The cabin felt different now, less like a refuge and more like a home. She'd added small touches, wildflowers in a jar on the table, a quilt she'd sewn from scraps, curtains for the windows. Rowan never commented on these changes, but she noticed him running his hand over the quilt one morning with something like wonder on his face. They fell into an easy rhythm on the rainy days. Rowan would maintain his equipment, sharpening knives, oiling traps, fixing broken tools. Lydia would sew or read or practice the basic reading and writing skills Rowan had started teaching her at night. She told him one evening that her mother had taught her to read when she was young, but her father had forbidden it after her mother died. Said education made women uppity and difficult. Lydia had forgotten most of what she'd learned in the years of enforced ignorance. Rowan had looked at her with barely contained fury when she'd told him that story. Then he'd gone to his trunk and pulled out 3 books. We'll start with this one, he'd said, handing her a worn copy of poetry. Your mother's book is good, but you need more than one. Now Lydia was working her way through the poetry collection, sounding out difficult words and asking Rowan for help when she got stuck. He was patient with her, never making her feel stupid for asking. One rainy afternoon, she was reading aloud while Rowan worked on a broken saddle strap. She stumbled over a particularly complex passage and made a frustrated noise. I don't understand this part. Read it again, slower. She did. It still didn't make sense. It's about loss, Rowan said, not looking up from his work. The poet's trying to describe what it feels like when someone you love is gone, but you keep seeing them everywhere. In doorways they used to stand in chairs they used to sit in, that kind of thing. Lydia read the passage again with that context. It suddenly clicked into place. That's heartbreaking. Most good poetry is. Have you lost people like that? Rowan's hand stilled on the leather. Yeah, a few. Do you still see them? Sometimes. My mother mostly. She died when I was 16. Cancer. There are days I swear I can still hear her humming while she cooked. Lydia had never heard Rowan talk about his mother before. She set down the book. What was she like? Tough. Fair. She didn't take nonsense from anyone, including my father. He was a drunk, mean when he drank, meaner when he didn't. She kept him in line as best she could. After she died, he fell apart completely. I left home a year later and never went back. Do you regret that? Leaving? No. Not going back before he died? Sometimes. What would you have said to him? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Doesn't matter now. Lydia understood that feeling. The weight of words unsaid to people who were gone. I never got to tell my mother I loved her before she died, Lydia said quietly. She got sick so fast. One day she was fine, the next she couldn't breathe. She was gone within a week. I was 12 and stupid, and I thought I'd have more time. She knew. You can't know that. I do know it. Because you were her daughter. She knew. Lydia felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back. I miss her. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the rain drumming on the roof above them. Sometimes grief needed space more than comfort. Eventually, Lydia picked up the book again and kept reading. Dates. By late April, tiny green shoots began appearing in the garden. Lydia checked them obsessively, terrified they'd die overnight. "They're not going anywhere," Rowan said, watching her inspect the potato plants for the third time that morning. "Something could eat them." "That's what the fence is for." "A deer could jump the fence." "Then we'll build it higher." "What if there's a late frost? Then we'll cover them." "Rowan, I'm being serious." "So am I." "Lydia, the plants are fine. You're doing everything right. You need to relax." She straightened and turned to face him. "I don't know how to relax." "I've noticed." "Is it annoying?" "It's understandable, but you're allowed to enjoy things without waiting for them to fall apart." Lydia looked at him standing there in the morning sunlight, patient as always, and felt something crack open in her chest. "What if I don't know how?" she asked quietly. Rowan stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Then I'll teach you," he said. "Same way I taught you to shoot, one step at a time until it doesn't feel so impossible anymore. And if I'm a slow learner, then we'll take it slow." They stood there for a beat too long. Lydia's heart was hammering in her chest. She wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to know what it would feel like to be held by someone who wasn't trying to hurt her, but fear held her frozen. Rowan seemed to sense it. He stepped back, giving her space. "Come on," he said, his voice carefully casual. "I'll teach you how to fish. The creek's high enough now." Lydia exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to fish." "I know, that's why I'm teaching you." "Is there anything you don't know how to do?" "Plenty of things, but fishing isn't one of them." They spent the afternoon at the creek. Rowan showed her how to bait a hook, how to cast, how to read the water for signs of fish. Lydia was terrible at it. Her line got tangled 3 times, and she nearly hooked Rowan's ear on her 4th cast. "Maybe this isn't my skill," she said, frustrated. "You're doing fine. I almost took your ear off." "But you didn't. That's progress." Despite her frustration, Lydia found herself laughing. "You have a very low bar for success, or a high tolerance for chaos. Either way, keep trying." On her 7th cast, she felt a tug on the line. "Rowan, I see it. Pull back gently. Don't jerk it or you'll lose the hook." Lydia did as instructed. The fish fought, bending the pole. Her arms strained with the effort of keeping the line taut. "Reel it in slowly. That's it. Nice and steady." The fish broke the surface, a decent-sized trout, silvery and thrashing. "I got one." "You did. Keep reeling." Lydia pulled the fish to shore with Rowan's guidance. When she finally had it on the bank, she stared at it in disbelief. "I actually caught a fish." "You did." "I caught a fish," Rowan was grinning. "I told you you could do it." Lydia looked at the trout, then at Rowan, then back at the trout. Then she threw her arms around him without thinking. The hug surprised both of them. Rowan went still for a moment. Then, carefully, he put his arms around her. It was the first time Lydia had initiated physical contact with anyone in years. The first time she'd hugged someone who wasn't her mother. She pulled back quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to "Don't apologize. I just got excited and—" "Lydia, it's fine. Better than fine." She looked up at him. His expression was soft, open. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stood there in the afternoon sunlight, the creek rushing past, the mountains rising around them. For the first time in her life, Lydia felt something that wasn't fear or grief or resignation. She felt happy. What? May arrived warm and bright. The garden flourished under Lydia's careful attention. The mountains bloomed with wildflowers. Birds returned from their winter migrations, filling the air with song. Rowan made a trip to town for supplies, and Lydia asked him to pick up fabric for new curtains. He returned 3 days later with the fabric, coffee, ammunition, and a surprise. "What's this?" Lydia asked, looking at the small package wrapped in brown paper. "Open it." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a book. A new book, not worn or water damaged. The cover was green with gold lettering. "It's a collection of stories," Rowan said. "The shopkeeper said it was popular. Thought you might like it." Lydia ran her fingers over the cover. No one had ever bought her a book before. "Rowan, this is... If you don't like it, I can take it back." "No, I love it, thank you." She looked up at him, and something passed between them. Something unspoken but clear. "You're welcome," he said quietly. That night, Lydia read from the new book by the fire. Rowan pretended to be working on his carving, but she caught him watching her instead. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just, you look happy." "I am happy." "Good. Are you happy?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He set down his carving. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I think I am." "You don't sound sure." "I'm not used to it. Being happy. It feels fragile." Lydia understood that completely. Like if you acknowledge it, it'll disappear. Exactly like that. She closed the book and set it aside. "My mother used to say that happiness isn't something you find. It's something you build, piece by piece, day by day." Your mother was smart. She was. I wish you could have met her. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lydia stood and moved toward her room. "Good night, Rowan." "Good night, Lydia." She paused at her door. "Thank you. For the book. And for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "I know, but I want to." She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart racing. She was falling for him. The realization should have terrified her, and it did, a little. But more than fear, she felt something else. Hope. The weeks passed. Summer arrived in full force, turning the mountain green and lush. Lydia's garden produced more vegetables than they could eat. She started preserving the excess, pickling, drying, storing for the winter ahead. Rowan built shelves in the root cellar to hold the jars. They worked together in easy tandem, their movements synchronized from months of living side by side. One afternoon, while they were working in the garden, Lydia asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you ever want to leave the mountain?" Rowan looked up from the weeding. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You've been here 7 years. That's a long time to be in one place." "I like it here." "But don't you miss people, conversation, the rest of the world?" He was quiet for a moment. "I used to think I didn't, but then you showed up and I realized what I'd actually been missing wasn't people in general. It was the right person." Lydia's breath caught. "Rowan, I'm not saying that to make you uncomfortable. I want you to know that you changed things for me. Made this place feel less like hiding and more like living." She didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to articulate the tangle of emotions in her chest. "You changed things for me too," she said finally. "Made me feel like maybe I deserve to take up space in the world." "You do deserve it." "I'm starting to believe that." They looked at each other across the garden rows. The sun was high and bright. The air smelled like earth and growing things. "Lydia, I need to tell you something." Her heart started racing. "Okay, I care about you. More than I probably should. And if that makes things complicated, I'm sorry. But I thought you should know." She stared at him, her mind spinning. "You care about me," she repeated. "Yes." "Romantically?" "Yes." Lydia felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "I don't know what to do with that information." "You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed you to know." "What if I care about you too?" Hope flared in his eyes. "Do you?" "I think so." "I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to. My father sold me to you. That's the only romantic context I have." "That wasn't romantic. That was a transaction that I hated every second of." "I know that now, but it's still tangled up in my head with everything else." Rowan nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I need time to figure out what I'm feeling." "Take all the time you need." "You're not angry?" "Why would I be angry?" "Because I can't just say yes or no right now." "Lydia, I'm not asking you for an answer. I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with that truth is entirely up to you." She felt tears prickling her eyes again. Not sad tears, just overwhelmed tears. "You're too good to me. I'm treating you like a human being. That's not being too good. That's baseline decency. Most people don't even manage that. Then most people are failing at being human." Lydia laughed through her tears. "How are you real?" "Stubbornness and spite, mostly." She moved toward him without thinking and hugged him again. This time he hugged back immediately, his arms solid and warm around her. "Thank you for being patient with me," she whispered against his shoulder. "Always." They stood there in the garden, holding each other while the sun beat down and the mountains watched in silence. And Lydia thought that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand what happiness felt like. The conversation in the garden changed something between them. Not dramatically, there was no sudden shift, no grand declaration. But the air felt different, lighter somehow. Like a door had been opened just a crack, letting in fresh air. Lydia found herself noticing things she'd trained herself not to see before. The way Rowan's hands moved when he worked with wood, precise and sure. The lines around his eyes when he smiled. The quiet strength in the way he carried himself, never using his size to intimidate, always making himself smaller in her presence so she'd feel safe. She caught him watching her too. Not in the way men in town had watched her when she was younger, that predatory assessment that made her skin crawl. This was different, softer, like he was memorizing the details, the way she hummed while she cooked, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was reading, the way she bit her bottom lip when she was concentrating on something difficult. They didn't talk about feelings again, not directly, but the awareness hung between them like smoke. 2 weeks after their conversation, Lydia was working on the fence around the garden when a post snapped under her weight. She went down hard, twisting her ankle in the process. "Damn it!" she hissed, grabbing her leg. Rowan was at her side within seconds. "Don't move. Let me see." "I'm fine." "Lydia, I said I'm fine." But when she tried to stand, her ankle buckled. Rowan caught her before she hit the ground again. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, scooping her up without asking permission. "Put me down." "No." "Rowan, I can walk." "Clearly you can't. Stop arguing and let me help you." He carried her into the cabin and set her down on one of the chairs. Then he knelt in front of her and carefully removed her boot. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "I know." He probed her ankle gently. Lydia winced but didn't cry out. "It's not broken," Rowan said after a moment. "Just a bad sprain. You need to stay off it for a few days." "I don't have time to stay off it. The garden will survive. You need to rest." "I hate resting." "I'm aware. You're going to do it anyway." He wrapped her ankle with strips of cloth and propped it up on a stool. Then he made her tea without asking if she wanted any and set it on the table beside her. "I feel useless," Lydia said, staring at her elevated foot. "You're injured. There's a difference. It's my own fault for being careless. It's a broken fence post's fault for being rotten. Stop trying to take blame for things that aren't your fault." Lydia looked at him. He was still kneeling in front of her, his hands resting on his knees. His expression was patient but firm. "You really don't blame me?" she asked quietly. "For what? Gravity?" "For being a burden." Something dark flickered across Rowan's face. "You are not a burden. You have never been a burden. And I need you to stop thinking of yourself that way. It's hard. I know it is. But you're worth more than what you can produce or how useful you are. You're worth something because you exist. That's it. That's the only requirement." Lydia felt her throat tighten. "My father used to say I was only worth what I could do for him." "Your father was wrong about a lot of things. That most of all." She blinked hard against tears. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I'm just telling you what I wish someone had told me when I was drowning in the same thoughts." "Did it help? When someone finally said it?" "No one ever did. That's why I'm saying it to you now." Lydia reached out and took his hand without thinking. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, steady. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me for basic human decency." "Maybe not, but I'm going to anyway." They sat like that for a long moment, her hand in his, the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Then Rowan cleared his throat and stood, gently releasing her hand. "I should fix that fence before a deer gets in and destroys everything you've worked for. Okay?" He paused at the door. "Call if you need anything." "I will." After he left, Lydia sat alone in the quiet cabin, her ankle throbbing, her hand still warm from his touch. She was falling in love with him. The thought didn't scare her as much as it should have. The forced rest lasted 3 days. 3 long, frustrating days where Lydia had to watch Rowan do all the work while she sat useless in a chair. He brought her books to read. Made her meals, checked her ankle morning and night, never complained, never made her feel like she was being a burden, even though she clearly was. On the third day, she snapped. I can't do this anymore. Rowan looked up from the vegetables he was chopping for dinner. Do what? Sit here. Watch you work. Feel useless. Your ankle's not healed yet. It's better. I can walk on it. Walking and working are different things. I'm going insane, Rowan. I need to do something. He studied her for a moment. Then he set down the knife. All right, you can help me with dinner, but you're sitting in that chair while you do it. Deal. He brought her the vegetables in a bowl, and she peeled potatoes while he worked on the stew. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. Can I ask you a question? Lydia said after a while. Always. Why did you really come to the mountain? You said it was to be alone, but there has to be more to it than that. Rowan was quiet for a long time, long enough that Lydia thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he spoke. After the war, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the people I'd killed. Some of them were enemies. Some of them were probably just scared kids like me who got caught on the wrong side of a bad situation. It didn't matter. Dead is dead. He stirred the stew mechanically. I tried drinking it away. Didn't work. Tried working myself to exhaustion. That didn't work either. Finally, I realized that I couldn't be around people anymore. Couldn't pretend to be normal. Couldn't make small talk or go to church or act like I hadn't spent 3 years learning how to kill efficiently. So you came here. So I came here, figured if I was going to be miserable, I might as well be miserable somewhere quiet. Did it help? Eventually. Took a few years, but yeah. The quiet helped. The work helped. Not having to pretend helped most of all. Lydia finished peeling a potato and started on another one. I understand that, she said quietly. The pretending. I spent my whole childhood pretending everything was fine, that my father wasn't a drunk, that the bruises were from being clumsy, that I wasn't hungry all the time. It was exhausting. When did you stop pretending? When my mother died. After that, there didn't seem to be much point in keeping up the facade. Everyone in town knew what he was anyway. Why didn't anyone help you? Lydia laughed bitterly. Because I wasn't their problem. People don't want to get involved in other people's family business. Easier to look the other way and tell themselves it's not their concern. That's cowardice. Maybe. But it's also human nature. Rowan turned to look at her. You're better than that? I'm not sure I am. I looked the other way plenty of times too. Saw other kids getting hurt and did nothing. Saw women with black eyes in town and pretended not to notice. That's different. You were surviving. Is it? Or is that just an excuse I tell myself to feel better? The question hung in the air between them. I don't know, Rowan admitted. I've asked myself the same thing about the war. Whether I was following orders or just using orders as an excuse to do things I wanted to do anyway. What did you decide? That it doesn't matter. The people are still dead either way. All I can do is try to be better now. Lydia nodded slowly. That's what I'm trying to do too. Be better. Make up for the times I wasn't. You're doing a pretty good job. You have to say that. I don't have to say anything. I'm choosing to say it because it's true. She looked at him standing there at the stove, firelight dancing across his face, and felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Rowan? Yeah? I think I'm ready. He turned to face her fully. Ready for what? To answer your question from a few weeks ago. His expression shifted, hopeful but cautious. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Okay. Lydia set down the potato and the knife. Her hands were shaking slightly. I do care about you. Romantically. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Scared of what? Scared that if I let myself care, you'd use it against me. Or you'd leave. Or I'd wake up one day and realize this was all too good to be true. Rowan crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly, and I would never use your feelings against you, ever. How can you promise that? Because I know what it's like to have someone weaponize your emotions. My father did it to my mother for years. I watched her shrink herself trying to avoid setting him off. I promised myself I'd never be that kind of man. Lydia searched his face, looking for the lie, the crack in the mask, the hint of danger. She didn't find any. I want to try, she said quietly. I want to try being with you, really being with you. But I need you to be patient with me because I don't know how to do this. I'll be as patient as you need me to be. What if I'm broken? What if I can't ever be normal? Then we'll be broken together, and we'll figure out what normal means for us. Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks. Why are you so good to me? Because you deserve good things. Because you're strong and brave and you've survived hell and you're still kind. Because when I look at you, I see everything I thought I'd lost in the war. Hope. Goodness. The possibility that maybe the world isn't completely rotten. Rowan, he reached up and gently wiped the tears from her face. I love you, Lydia. I know it's too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way yet, and that's okay. But I need you to know, I love you. The words hit her like a physical thing. 3 words that should have terrified her. 3 words that instead felt like coming home. I think I love you too, she whispered. I'm not sure what love is supposed to feel like, but whatever this is, it's the best thing I've ever felt. Rowan smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. That's good enough for me. Can I kiss you? The question surprised both of them. Lydia had never initiated a kiss before, never wanted to. The few times men had tried to kiss her in town, she'd felt nothing but revulsion. But this was different. You can do whatever you want, Rowan said softly. I'm yours if you'll have me. Lydia leaned forward slowly, giving herself time to change her mind, time to panic and pull back. She didn't panic. Their lips met softly, carefully. A gentle pressure that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they pulled apart, Rowan was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Was that okay? Lydia asked, suddenly nervous. That was perfect. I've never kissed anyone before. Not like that. Not because I wanted to. Then I'm honored to be your first. They sat there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. The stew's going to burn, Lydia said eventually. I don't care. I do. I'm hungry. Rowan laughed and stood, returning to the stove, but he kept glancing at her while he cooked, like he was making sure she was still real. Lydia found herself smiling. Really, truly smiling. For the first time in her life, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to look forward to. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Rowan and Lydia navigated their new relationship with the same care they'd brought to everything else. Slowly, patiently, respecting boundaries that sometimes shifted day by day. Some days Lydia wanted to be close, wanted his arms around her, wanted the reassurance of his presence. Other days, old ghosts crept in and she needed space. Rowan never pushed, never made her feel guilty for the bad days. I'm sorry, she said one morning after spending the previous evening locked in her room, unable to explain why his proximity had suddenly felt suffocating. Don't apologize, you needed space. That's not a crime. But I hurt your feelings. My feelings will survive. What matters is that you feel safe. How are you so understanding? Because I have bad days too. Days where I can't stand to be touched or talked to. Days where the war comes back and I'm not really here. You've been patient with me through those. I can be patient with you. It was true. Rowan had nightmares sometimes. He'd wake gasping, reaching for weapons that weren't there, eyes wild and unseeing. Lydia had learned to speak softly when it happened, to give him space to remember where he was, to not take it personally when he flinched away from comfort. They were both carrying damage, but they were learning to carry it together. One evening in late June, Lydia was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Rowan joined her. I want to learn more, she said without preamble. More what? Everything. Reading, writing, numbers. I can barely sign my own name. I want to be able to do more than that. All right, we can work on it. Will you teach me? Really teach me? Of course. Even if I'm slow? Especially if you're slow, it means you're being thorough. So they started lessons. Every evening after dinner, Rowan would work with her on letters and numbers and basic arithmetic. Lydia attacked it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She made mistakes, got frustrated, threw her pencil across the room more than once. But she didn't quit. Why is this so important to you? Rowan asked one night after she'd struggled through a particularly difficult passage. Because my father took it from me. Education, knowledge, the ability to read a contract or write a letter or do basic math. He took all of it and told me women didn't need those things. Her hands clenched into fists on the table. I want it back. I want everything he took from me, and I want to prove that I can learn, that I'm not stupid like he said I was. You're not stupid. You're one of the smartest people I know. You're biased. I'm honest. There's a difference. Lydia looked at him across the table. Do you really think I can do this? I know you can. You can do anything you set your mind to. Even if it takes years? Then it takes years. We're not going anywhere. The certainty in his voice made something settle in Lydia's chest, a quiet confidence she'd never felt before. She went back to the lesson with renewed focus. July brought heat that made the cabin feel like an oven. Rowan and Lydia worked in the early mornings and late evenings, resting during the hottest part of the day. One afternoon, Lydia made a decision that had been building for weeks. I want to go to town with you next time, she said. Rowan looked up from the saddle he was mending. You sure? No, but I want to try anyway. What changed? Lydia was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. I've been hiding up here, using the mountain as an excuse not to face the world, but I can't hide forever. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life being afraid of my own shadow. You're not afraid of your shadow. You're afraid of your father. Same difference? It's not. One is irrational fear. The other is survival instinct. There's nothing wrong with being cautious around someone who hurt you. Maybe, but I need to know if I can handle it. If I can walk through town and not fall apart. If I can see him and not feel like that scared girl again. Rowan set down the saddle. If we go and it's too much, we leave. No judgment, no shame. Agreed? Agreed. When do you want to do this? Next week, before I lose my nerve. All right, next week. The days leading up to the trip felt endless. Lydia veered between determination and panic. She practiced breathing exercises Rowan taught her. Imagined walking through town with her head high. Tried to prepare herself for every possible scenario. The morning they were supposed to leave, she almost backed out. I can't do this, she said, standing frozen by the door. Yes, you can. What if he's there? What if he tries to talk to me? Then I'll handle it. You don't have to speak to him. You don't have to acknowledge him. You can walk right past him like he doesn't exist. What if I freeze? Then I'll get you somewhere safe and we'll leave. Lydia, there's no scenario where I abandon you to deal with this alone. I'm with you the whole time. She took a shaky breath. Promise? I promise. Okay, let's go before I change my mind. The ride down the mountain took 2 hours. 2 hours where Lydia's anxiety built with every step. By the time Blackthorn Ridge came into view, her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Breathe, Rowan said quietly. I am breathing. Slower, you're going to hyperventilate. Lydia forced herself to take longer, deeper breaths. It helped. Slightly. They rode into town mid-morning. The main street was busy, people going about their daily business, completely unaware that Lydia felt like she was walking through a minefield. Where do you need to go? She asked, proud that her voice only shook a little. General store, post office. Won't take long. They dismounted in front of the general store. Lydia's legs felt unsteady, but she stayed upright. Inside, the shopkeeper looked up and did a double take. Lydia Voss? It's just Lydia now, she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. I'll be damned. Heard you'd gone up the mountain with Creed. Didn't believe it. Well, now you can. The shopkeeper's eyes moved between her and Rowan. You doing all right up there? Better than I've ever been. Good. That's good to hear. Rowan gave his list to the shopkeeper and they waited while he gathered the supplies. Lydia stayed close to Rowan but forced herself to stand tall, to take up space. When they left the store, she felt marginally more confident, until she saw him. Virgil Voss was coming out of the saloon across the street. He looked worse than Lydia remembered, thinner, more ragged, with the particular desperation of a man drowning in drink. Their eyes met across the dusty street. Lydia's first instinct was to run, to hide, to make herself small. Instead, she lifted her chin and stared him down. Virgil's expression twisted through several emotions: surprise, shame, anger, something that might have been regret. Then he turned and walked the other direction without a word. Lydia exhaled slowly. "You okay?" Rowan asked quietly. Yeah, I think I am. He's gone." "I know, and I didn't fall apart." "No, you didn't. You were strong." Lydia looked at Rowan. "I was, wasn't I?" "You were. I'm proud of you." Those words, "I'm proud of you," hit harder than any weapon. Her father had never said them, had never been proud of her for anything, but Rowan was, and that mattered more than she could articulate. They finished their errands without incident. On the ride back up the mountain, Lydia felt lighter, like she'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. "Thank you for coming with me," she said. "You did the hard part. I just stood there. You did more than that. You believed I could do it. That helped." "You can do anything, Lydia. I hope you're starting to see that." She smiled. "I'm starting to." August arrived with afternoon thunderstorms that rolled through the mountains like clockwork. Lydia loved them, the way the air smelled before the rain, the sound of thunder echoing between the peaks, the way everything felt clean afterward. One evening, she and Rowan were sitting on the porch watching a storm approach when she asked a question that had been on her mind. "Do you think about the future?" "Sometimes. Why?" "I've been thinking about it a lot lately. What comes next? Where we go from here?" "Where do you want to go?" Lydia was quiet for a moment. "Nowhere. I want to stay here, build a life here, maybe expand the garden, get some chickens, learn to hunt properly so I'm not dependent on you for meat." "You're not dependent on me." "I know, but I want to be able to pull my own weight, really pull it." "You already do." "I want to do more." Rowan smiled. "Then we'll teach you to hunt, and we'll get chickens, and we'll build whatever life you want." "What do you want?" "This. You. A future that doesn't feel like I'm just killing time until I die." Lydia reached over and took his hand. "I want that too." They sat in comfortable silence as the storm rolled closer. Lightning flickered on the horizon. Thunder rumbled low and deep. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "I love you. I know I said it before, but I wanted to say it again. So you know it's real." He turned to look at her, and his expression made her breath catch. "I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy. "We should go inside," Lydia said. "Probably." Neither of them moved. They stayed on the porch until the rain came in earnest, soaking them both. Then they ran inside, laughing, dripping water on the floor, alive in a way that felt almost painful. And Lydia thought that maybe this was what happiness looked like. Not perfection, not the absence of fear or pain or difficulty, just this. Two people choosing each other, day after day, storm after storm, building something that refused to break. The happiness lasted exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of peace where Lydia allowed herself to believe that maybe the past would stay buried, that Virgil had seen her in town, registered that she was alive and well, and decided to leave her alone. She should have known better. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late August. Rowan had gone down to check the trap lines near the southern ridge, leaving Lydia at the cabin to work on her reading. She was halfway through a chapter when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Lydia's stomach dropped. They rarely had visitors, never had multiple visitors at once. She set down the book and moved to the window, staying back from the glass so she couldn't be seen easily. 4 men rode into the clearing. 3 she didn't recognize, ranch hands by the look of them, hard-faced men with the kind of casual violence that came from years of rough living. The 4th rider made her blood run cold. Virgil Voss. He looked different than he had 3 weeks ago, cleaner, more sober, like he'd made an effort to pull himself together. That somehow made it worse. Lydia's hands started shaking. She backed away from the window and looked around the cabin frantically. The rifle was above the door. Rowan's shotgun was in the loft. She had the small pistol he'd given her for emergencies in her room. She grabbed the rifle first, checked that it was loaded, then positioned herself near the door where she could see out but maintain some cover. Virgil dismounted and walked toward the cabin like he owned the place. "Lydia!" he called out. "I know you're in there. Come on out. We need to talk. Lydia didn't respond. Her heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear over it. Don't make this difficult, Virgil continued. I'm your father. We got business to discuss. One of the ranch hands laughed. Maybe she can't hear you, Virgil. Want me to knock? Stay on your horse, Jack, Virgil snapped. Then louder. Lydia, I'm not leaving until we talk. You can come out willingly, or we can wait for Creed to come back and have this conversation with him present. Your choice. Lydia's mind raced. Rowan wouldn't be back for at least another hour, maybe longer. She could hide in the cabin and hope they left, but that seemed unlikely. They'd just wait, or worse, force their way in. She thought about what Rowan had taught her. Stand your ground. Don't show fear even when you feel it. You're not powerless anymore. Taking a deep breath, Lydia opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. She kept the rifle pointed at the ground, but her finger was on the trigger guard. Virgil's eyebrows went up. Well, look at you, all grown up and armed. What do you want? Lydia's voice was steadier than she felt. That's a hell of a greeting for your father. You sold me. You don't get to call yourself my father anymore. Now, Lydia, that's not fair. I was in a bad spot. Desperate. You can't hold that against me forever. I can, and I will. What do you want? Virgil's expression shifted. The false friendliness dropped away, revealing something harder underneath. I want what's mine. You don't own me. Actually, that's debatable. See, I've been talking to some people, lawyers. Seems like that transaction with Creed might not have been entirely legal. You were sold under duress, no proper contract, no witnesses. Could argue it was invalid. Lydia's grip on the rifle tightened. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Maybe. But it's enough to cause problems, enough to get the law involved if I wanted. So get the law involved. I'll tell them exactly what kind of man you are, what you did to me for 20 years. One of the ranch hands shifted in his saddle. Virgil, I thought you said this would be easy. Shut up, Clay. Virgil never took his eyes off Lydia. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came to make you an offer. I don't want anything from you. Just hear me out. I've had time to think, to get sober, to realize I made mistakes. Mistakes, Lydia repeated flatly. You call 20 years of abuse a mistake? I call it complicated. Your mother dying, the farm failing, the drinking. I wasn't myself. You were exactly yourself. That's the problem. Virgil's jaw tightened. Regardless, I want to make amends. Start over. Start over how? Come back home. We can work together. Make the farm successful again. Lydia stared at him. You're insane. I'm offering you a second chance. A second chance at what? Being your punching bag? Your servant? No, thank you. Things would be different this time. They wouldn't. And even if they were, I don't want them. I have a life here, a good life. Playing house with Creed? Virgil's voice turned ugly. That what you call it? You think he actually cares about you? He bought you, Lydia, just like he'd buy a horse or a plow. You're property to him. That's not true, isn't it? What happens when he gets tired of you? When the novelty wears off? You think he's going to keep feeding you out of the goodness of his heart? Rowan's not like you. All men are like me, sweetheart. We just hide it better. The third ranch hand, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Virgil, we doing this or not? I got work to get back to. Virgil held up a hand. Give me a minute. He turned back to Lydia. Last chance. Come back willingly, or this gets ugly. It's already ugly, and my answer is no. You sure about that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Virgil's expression went cold. All right, you had your chance. He turned to the ranch hands. Boys, I'm invoking my parental rights. My daughter's been kidnapped and held against her will by Rowan Creed. We're here to rescue her. Lydia's blood ran cold. That's a lie. Is it? You were taken from town without your consent, kept isolated on this mountain. I'd say that fits the definition of kidnapping pretty well. I stayed by choice. Did you? Or were you too scared to leave, too broken down to fight back? The ranch hand named Jack swung down from his horse. Come on, miss. This'll be easier if you don't struggle. Lydia raised the rifle. Stay where you are. Jack froze. You even know how to use that thing? Want to find out? Virgil laughed. She's bluffing. She can't hit anything. Never could. Try me, Lydia said, her voice ice. She aimed at the ground 2 feet in front of Jack and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the mountain silence. Dirt exploded where the bullet hit. Jack stumbled backward with a yelp. Jesus Christ! Clay's horse spooked, nearly throwing him. Virgil's face went red. You little... The next one goes through somebody's leg, Lydia said, working the bolt to chamber another round. I suggest you leave. Now. You can't shoot all of us, Virgil said. Maybe not, but I can shoot you, and that would make this trip a complete waste for everyone involved. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She won't have to shoot all of you. I'll handle whoever she misses. Everyone turned. Rowan stood at the edge of the clearing with his shotgun leveled. He must have heard the shot and come running. Creed, Virgil said, nice of you to join us. Nice of you to trespass on my land. Get off it. I'm here for my daughter. You don't have a daughter. You sold her, remember? That transaction was illegal. Was it? Because I have the receipt, signed by you, witnessed by the bartender at the saloon. Seems pretty legal to me. Virgil's face twisted. You can't keep her here against her will. I'm not keeping her anywhere. She stays because she wants to. Lydia, you want to leave with your father? I'd rather eat glass, Lydia said without hesitation. There you have it. Now get off my property before I start shooting. The ranch hand named Jack held up his hands. Look, we don't want trouble. Virgil said this was a simple retrieval. Nobody said anything about getting shot at. Then you should choose better employers, Rowan said. Leave. Now. Jack looked at Virgil. I'm out. This ain't worth whatever you're paying. Same, Clay added. I signed up to intimidate a girl, not get in a shootout with a war veteran. The third ranch hand was already turning his horse around. Virgil watched his hired help abandon him with barely contained rage. You're all cowards. We're smart, Jack said. There's a difference. The 3 ranch hands rode off, leaving Virgil alone. This isn't over, Virgil said, his voice shaking with fury. Yes, it is, Lydia said. She lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. You don't own me. You have no rights to me. And if you come back here, I will shoot you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. You ungrateful... I'm done being grateful for scraps. I'm done being afraid of you. You're a pathetic, violent drunk who destroyed everything you ever touched. And I survived you. That's more than you'll ever be able to say. Virgil looked like he'd been slapped. You'll regret this, he said quietly. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Rowan took a step forward. Virgil, you've got 10 seconds to get on that horse. Then I'm going to assume you're a threat and act accordingly. You can't threaten me. I'll go to the law. Go ahead. Tell them how you sold your daughter for whiskey money. Tell them how you came to my property with armed men to take her back. See how sympathetic they are. Virgil's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, it looked like he might do something stupid. Then he turned and mounted his horse. This isn't over, he repeated. Yeah, you said that already, Lydia said. Goodbye, Virgil. He rode off without another word. Lydia stood frozen on the porch, the rifle still in her hands, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. Rowan approached slowly. Can I take the rifle? She nodded mutely and let him take it. You did good, he said quietly. I almost shot him. But you didn't. You stayed in control. I wasn't in control. I was terrified. Being scared and being in control aren't mutually exclusive. You stood your ground. You didn't back down. That takes courage. Lydia's legs suddenly felt weak. She sat down hard on the porch steps. He's going to come back. Maybe. Probably. What do we do? Rowan sat beside her. We prepare. Make sure you're armed whenever I'm not here. Set up some warning systems around the property. Maybe get a dog. And we let people in town know what happened. Hard to pull something in secret when everyone knows to watch for it. Will that be enough? I don't know, but it's a start. Lydia leaned against him, exhausted. I'm so tired of being afraid. I know. When does it stop? When we make it stop. She looked up at him. How? By refusing to let him have power over you anymore. By living well in spite of him. By building something so strong that his poison can't touch it. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard as hell. But it's possible. Lydia closed her eyes. I can't believe I shot at someone. You shot at the ground. There's a difference. Still, I pulled the trigger. Because you had to. Because standing up for yourself sometimes means making people understand you're serious. My hands are still shaking. That's normal. Give it time. They sat together on the porch as the sun climbed higher and the mountain settled back into its usual quiet. But the peace felt different now, more fragile, like a held breath. Rowan? Yeah? Thank you for coming back when you did. I heard the shot from halfway down the ridge. Nearly broke my neck getting here. I'm glad you did. Me too. Dick. Word spread through Blackthorn Ridge within 2 days. The shopkeeper heard it from the bartender who heard it from Jack, the ranch hand who'd wisely decided not to participate in attempted kidnapping. By the time Rowan made his next supply run, the whole town knew. The reaction was mixed. Some people thought Lydia was being dramatic, that Virgil was just a concerned father trying to look after his daughter, that she should show more respect for family. Others thought Virgil had gotten exactly what he deserved, that selling your child made you forfeit any parental rights, that Lydia had every right to defend herself. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Coleman, who'd known Virgil for 20 years, fell somewhere in the middle. I'm not saying I approve of what Virgil did, Coleman told Rowan when he stopped by the general store, but I'm also not sure threatening him with firearms is the answer. He came onto my property with armed men, Rowan said flatly. What would you have done? I'd have handled it through proper channels. Virgil doesn't respect proper channels. He respects force, always has. Coleman sighed. Just keep it civil, all right? Last thing I need is a shooting war in my jurisdiction. Then make sure Virgil knows he's not welcome on my land. That's all the civility I can offer. I'll talk to him. You do that. Rowan finished his shopping and was loading supplies onto his horse when a woman approached him. She was middle-aged, worn down by hard living, with a black eye she'd tried to cover with powder. Mr. Creed? Rowan turned. Yes? I'm Sarah Mathis. I heard about what happened with Virgil Voss and his daughter. Word travels fast. It does in a small town. She hesitated. I wanted to ask, is it true? That the girl stood up to him? That she threatened to shoot him? It's true. Something like hope flickered across Sarah's face. And she's all right? Living up on the mountain with you? She's more than all right. She's thriving. Sarah nodded slowly. My husband, he's like Virgil. Mean when he drinks, meaner when he doesn't. I've thought about leaving, but I don't have anywhere to go. Rowan studied her carefully. You asking for help? I don't know what I'm asking. I just hearing about Lydia, about someone who got out. It made me think maybe it's possible. It's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. Would you, if I did leave, would you and Lydia help me? Rowan thought about Lydia, about how she'd transformed from a frightened, broken girl into someone who could stare down her abuser with a rifle in her hands, about how she'd want him to answer this question. Yes, he said. If you decide to leave, come find us. We'll help however we can. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Leaving is the hardest part. I know, but knowing it's possible, that helps. She walked away before anyone could see them talking too long. Rowan finished loading his supplies and headed back up the mountain, his mind heavy with thoughts. When he told Lydia about the encounter that evening, she was quiet for a long time. We should help her, she said finally. I told her we would if she asks. No, I mean actively help her. Give her information, resources. Make sure she knows she's not alone. That could be dangerous. Her husband finds out we're encouraging her to leave. He might come after us. Let him come. I'm done being quiet while people suffer. Rowan looked at her across the table. She met his gaze steadily. You're serious about this, he said. Completely. I survived because you helped me when you didn't have to. Maybe it's time we pay that forward. This could get complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated. Rowan smiled despite himself. When did you get so brave? You taught me. Now I'm putting it into practice. All right, we'll help. But carefully. We can't save everyone, Lydia. No, but we can save someone. And that's better than nothing. Malcolm. 3 weeks passed. Virgil didn't return, but his absence felt more like a storm brewing than actual peace. Lydia threw herself into preparation. She practiced shooting every day until her accuracy was deadly. She learned to track movement through the forest. She helped Rowan set up tripwires around the property that would alert them to visitors. Sarah Mathis came to the cabin one evening just after sunset, her belongings in a single bag, her left arm in a makeshift sling. "He broke it," she said simply. "When I told him I was leaving, so I waited until he passed out drunk and I left anyway." Lydia brought her inside and tended to her arm while Rowan kept watch. They gave her food, a place to sleep, and the next morning Rowan took her to the next town over where she had a sister willing to take her in. When he returned, Lydia was in the garden. "She make it okay?" Lydia asked. "She's safe. Her sister's a tough woman. She'll take care of her." "Good. You realize this is just the beginning, right? People are going to talk. Word's going to spread that we're helping women leave bad situations. That's going to make us targets." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Lydia straightened and looked at him. "I spent 20 years being afraid, being small, being quiet so I wouldn't make things worse. I'm done with that. If helping other people means dealing with angry men, then that's what we'll deal with." "You're not worried?" "I'm terrified, but I'm more angry than scared now, and anger is useful." Rowan crossed the garden and pulled her into his arms. "You're incredible. You know that?" "I'm stubborn. That too." She leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Buying me that day?" "Never. Not for a single second. Even with all the complications, especially with the complications, you made my life complicated in all the best ways." Lydia smiled against his chest. "I love you. I love you too." They stood together in the garden as evening settled over the mountain. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound echoed between the peaks, wild and free. The confrontation came exactly 3 weeks after Sarah Mathis left her husband. Lydia was in the cabin when she heard the horses. Multiple horses again. More this time. She grabbed the rifle and moved to the window. 7 men rode into the clearing. Virgil was at the front. Behind him were the 3 ranch hands from before, plus 3 men Lydia didn't recognize. They all looked angry. "This is about Sarah," Lydia said aloud, her stomach sinking. Rowan appeared from the loft, shotgun in hand. "I counted 7. Same. You ready for this?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." They moved onto the porch together, side by side, united. Virgil dismounted. This time he didn't bother with false pleasantries. "You've been interfering in other people's marriages," he said. "We've been helping women escape abuse," Lydia corrected. "You took Sarah Mathis from her home." "She left on her own. We just gave her a place to recover." "That's theft. She belonged to her husband." "People don't belong to other people. I thought I made that clear last time." The man next to Virgil, big, broad-shouldered, with knuckles scarred from fighting, spoke up. "That's my wife you're talking about. You had no right." "Your wife, not your property. She chose to leave. That's her right." "She's confused. Needs to come home where she belongs. She's safe where she is, and she's not coming back." The man's face went red. "You uppity little—" "Choose your next words carefully," Rowan interrupted, his voice deadly calm, "because, depending on what comes out of your mouth, this conversation could get very short." "You threatening me?" "I'm informing you. There's a difference." Virgil held up a hand. "Nobody needs to get shot today. We just want Lydia to understand that actions have consequences." "I understand perfectly," Lydia said. "You're angry because your control over women is slipping, because people are realizing they don't have to tolerate abuse, and you're scared that if one person escapes, others might follow." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I lived it for 20 years. I know exactly what I'm talking about." One of the ranch hands shifted uncomfortably. "Virgil, I don't like this. Threatening women ain't what I signed up for." "Shut up, Jack." "I'm serious. This feels wrong." "Then leave." Jack looked at the other ranch hands. Clay nodded. They both dismounted and started walking their horses away. "Cowards!" Virgil shouted after them. "Smart!" Jack called back. "Like I said before, there's a difference." That left Virgil, Sarah's husband, and 3 men Lydia didn't know. Still bad odds, but better than 7. Last chance, Virgil said. Tell us where Sarah is. No, Lydia said simply. Then we'll make you. You can try. Virgil nodded to one of the unknown men. He started toward the porch. Lydia fired a warning shot into the dirt at his feet. The man froze. I told you last time, Lydia said. The next person who doesn't listen gets shot for real. You won't do it, Virgil said. You're not a killer. Neither were you until you beat my mother to death through neglect and cruelty. People change when they're pushed. Something flickered across Virgil's face. Shame, maybe. Or just anger at being called out. You want a war, little girl? No, I want you to leave, but if you insist on a war, I'll give you one. The standoff stretched, tension thick enough to cut. Then Sheriff Coleman rode into the clearing with 2 deputies. All right, that's enough, Coleman said. Everybody lower your weapons before somebody does something stupid. Sheriff, these people kidnapped my wife, Sarah's husband said. Did they? Because Sarah came to see me yesterday. Said she left of her own free will. Said you broke her arm when she tried to talk to you about it. She's lying. I saw the arm, saw the bruises, saw the terror in her eyes when I mentioned sending you after her. That doesn't sound like lying to me. She's my wife. And she's also a human being with rights, including the right to leave a marriage that's putting her in danger. This is bullshit. This is the law. Now I'm going to need all of you to disperse, peacefully, before I start arresting people for trespassing and making threats. Virgil glared at the sheriff. You're siding with them? I'm siding with the law, which says you can't force a grown woman to stay somewhere she doesn't want to be. And you definitely can't show up armed at someone's property making threats. Now leave, all of you. For a moment, it looked like Virgil might argue. Then he swung back onto his horse. This isn't over, he said. Again. Yeah, you've mentioned that, Lydia said, starting to sound like a broken record. Virgil's face went purple with rage, but he turned his horse and rode off. The other men followed reluctantly. When they were gone, Coleman dismounted and approached the porch. You two are stirring up a hornet's nest, he said. We're helping people, Lydia said. I know what you're doing, and between you and me, I think it's the right thing. But right doesn't always mean safe. You need to be careful. We are being careful. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're making enemies of some very dangerous men. They were already our enemies, Rowan said. We're just not pretending otherwise anymore. Coleman sighed. Just watch yourselves. I can't always get here in time if things go bad. We appreciate you coming today, Lydia said. Jack came and found me, said he didn't like the look of things, said Virgil was talking about teaching you a lesson. Remind me to thank Jack next time I see him. He's a decent man who fell into bad company. Glad he's getting out. Coleman mounted his horse. Be safe, you two. We will. After the sheriff left, Lydia and Rowan stood on the porch in silence. That was close, Rowan said finally. Too close. You holding up okay? Lydia thought about it. Her hands weren't shaking this time. Her heart rate was elevated but not panicked. She'd stood her ground against 7 men and come out the other side intact. Yeah, she said. I think I am. Good, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Let it begin then. I'm ready. Rowan smiled and pulled her close. When did you become so fearless? I'm not fearless. I'm just done being afraid. That might be even better. They stood together watching the sun set over the mountains. 2 people who'd chosen each other and chosen to fight for something bigger than themselves. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The weeks following the second confrontation brought an unexpected quiet. Not peace exactly. More like the silence before thunder. Lydia and Rowan remained vigilant, but Virgil seemed to have retreated into whatever dark corner he'd crawled out of. Word continued to spread about the mountain cabin where broken women could find sanctuary. It happened slowly at first. A whisper here, a careful question there, then more directly. A young woman named Rebecca showed up one October morning with her 2 small children and a face so bruised she could barely open one eye. Lydia took them in without hesitation, fed the children, and helped Rebecca make a plan. 3 days later, Rowan escorted them to a cousin's house 2 towns over. An older woman named Martha arrived in November, walking the entire mountain trail on foot because her husband had sold their horse for drinking money. She stayed for 2 weeks, helping Lydia preserve the last of the garden vegetables, before deciding to try her luck in a city out west where she had a sister. Each woman who passed through left something behind. Not possessions. Most of them arrived with nothing and left with even less. But they left marks on the cabin itself. A sense of purpose. A feeling that these walls meant something beyond simple shelter. Lydia found herself changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. The frightened girl who'd arrived at this cabin 9 months ago felt like a different person entirely. She could shoot straight, track game, read full paragraphs without stumbling, write her own name with confidence. She could look men in the eye and not flinch. She could say no and mean it. But more than any skill she'd learned, she'd discovered something harder to define. A core of steel she hadn't known existed. A refusal to accept the world's cruelty as inevitable. "You're becoming dangerous," Rowan told her one evening as they cleaned rifles together by lamplight. "Dangerous how?" "Dangerous to people who think power comes from making others small. You're showing women they don't have to stay small. That's the most dangerous thing you can do to a tyrant." Lydia considered this. "Good. Let me be dangerous then. The world could use more dangerous women." "I couldn't agree more." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Lydia spoke again. "Do you think we're making a difference? Really making one? You need to ask. You've seen the women who've come through here. I've seen 6 women in 3 months. 6. How many are still out there, still trapped? Hundreds, thousands probably. But that doesn't make the 6 any less important. You can't save everyone, Lydia. Nobody can. But you can save someone. And those someones matter. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it's more than was happening before. That counts." Lydia set down the rifle she'd been cleaning and looked at Rowan across the table. Firelight played across his face, highlighting the scars and worry lines that told the story of a hard life. "How did you get so wise?" she asked. "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of watching good people give up because they can't fix everything at once. Progress is incremental. Change is slow. That doesn't make it any less real." "When did you figure that out?" "When I realized I couldn't single-handedly end the war, couldn't save every soldier in my unit, couldn't prevent every death. I could only control my own actions, save who I could save, do right by the people directly in front of me. It took me years to make peace with that." "And have you? Made peace with it?" Rowan smiled sadly. "Some days. Other days I still see the faces of the ones I couldn't save. But I'm learning to live with both, the grief and the hope. They exist together." Lydia stood and moved around the table to where he sat. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "I'm glad you saved me," she said quietly. "I'm glad you let me." They stayed like that until the fire burned low and the temperature in the cabin dropped enough to make them notice. Then they banked the coals, locked the doors, and climbed to their respective sleeping spaces. Though lately, Lydia had been spending more nights in the loft with Rowan than in her own room. That night, as they lay tangled together under heavy blankets, Lydia spoke into the darkness. "I want to marry you." Rowan went very still. "What?" "You heard me. I want to marry you. Make it official. Not because I need to, but because I want everyone to know I chose you, that you chose me, that we're building something that matters." "Lydia, are you sure? Marriage is permanent, I know. That's the point. I just don't want you to feel pressured. We don't need a piece of paper to—" "I know we don't need it. I want it. There's a difference." Rowan pulled her closer. She could feel his heart beating against her back, quick and strong. "Ask me properly," he said. "What?" "If you want to marry me, ask me properly." Lydia turned in his arms so they were face to face in the darkness. "Rowan Creed, will you marry me?" "Yes." "Just like that?" "Just like that. I'd marry you tomorrow if we could arrange it." Lydia felt something bright and warm bloom in her chest. "We'll have to go to town, get it registered properly." "Worth it. People will talk. Let them. They're already talking." "Virgil will lose his mind." "Even better." Lydia laughed, the sound muffled against Rowan's chest. "I love you." "I love you too, future Mrs. Creed." "I'm keeping Lydia, not taking Voss ever again." "So Lydia Creed?" "Lydia Creed." She tested the name. "I like it. Sounds strong." "It is strong, because you're strong." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the mountain wind howling outside. the future stretching ahead of them like an unmapped trail. Botti. They went to town this following week to file the marriage paperwork. Sheriff Coleman witnessed the document signing with a knowing smile. "You two are really doing this," he said. "We really are," Lydia confirmed. "Well, congratulations. May you have many happy years together." "Thank you, Sheriff." As they left the office, Lydia caught sight of Virgil across the street. He was standing outside the saloon, staring at them with an expression of pure hatred. She met his gaze steadily, then took Rowan's hand and kept walking. "He saw," Rowan said quietly. "Good. Let him see. Let him know I'm not his to control anymore. I never was." They collected supplies and headed back up the mountain without incident, but Lydia could feel Virgil's eyes on her the entire time, tracking her movements like a predator watching prey. "He's going to do something," she said on the ride home. "Probably." "Aren't you worried?" "Worried? Yes. Surprised? No. Virgil's been building to something since that first confrontation. Whatever it is, it's coming. How do we prepare for something when we don't know what it is? Same way we've been preparing. Stay alert. Stay armed. Trust each other." Lydia nodded, but unease settled in her stomach like a stone. The attack came 3 days later. Lydia was alone at the cabin. Rowan had gone hunting and wouldn't be back until evening. She was working on a reading when she smelled smoke. Not wood smoke from the fireplace. Something else. Something wrong. She ran to the window and her blood went cold. The lean-to where they kept soot was on fire. Flames were already climbing the wooden structure, and they were spreading toward the cabin. Lydia grabbed the water bucket and ran outside, her mind racing. The creek was too far. The well was closer, but she'd never get enough water fast enough. Then she saw him. Virgil stood at the edge of the clearing with a torch in his hand and a smile on his face. "Thought you could just ignore me," he called out. "Thought you could humiliate me in front of the whole town and there'd be no consequences." Lydia's hand went to the pistol at her hip. "You're burning down my home. Our home. The one I should have had. The life you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. You threw it all away." "Lies," Virgil's voice cracked. "You turned everyone against me, made them think I was the monster, but I'm the victim here. I'm the one who lost everything." The lean-to collapsed with a shower of sparks. Lydia could hear Soot screaming from somewhere in the trees. Rowan must have turned him loose earlier. At least the horse was safe. But the cabin wouldn't be if the fire spread. "Stop this," Lydia said. "Please, just stop." "Why should I? You didn't stop. You kept interfering, kept taking women from their rightful homes. Kept making me look like a fool." "You made yourself look like a fool. You did that all on your own." Virgil threw the torch toward the cabin. It landed on the porch roof, and flames began to catch on the dry wood. Lydia didn't think. She just drew the pistol and fired. The shot hit Virgil in the shoulder. He went down with a scream, clutching the wound. For a moment, Lydia stood frozen, the gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. She'd shot him. She'd actually shot him. Then survival instinct kicked in. She ran to the well, filled the bucket, and started throwing water on the porch. The flames were stubborn, fueled by pine resin in the old wood. Virgil was still on the ground moaning. Lydia ignored him. She made 3 more trips to the well, each bucket of water beating back more of the fire. By the time Rowan came crashing through the trees with his rifle drawn, the flames on the porch were mostly out, though the lean-to was a total loss. Rowan took in the scene. Lydia soaked and breathing hard, Virgil bleeding in the dirt, the smoldering remains of the lean-to, and understood immediately. "You shot him," he said. "He was burning down our home." "Good." Rowan walked over to where Virgil lay and looked down at him with disgust. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" "She shot me," Virgil gasped. "You saw. She tried to kill me." "Looks like she missed anything vital. Pity." Rowan turned to Lydia. "Go get the sheriff. I'll make sure he doesn't bleed out before the law gets here." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Go. Take Soot if you can find him." Lydia ran into the trees, calling for the horse. She found him 20 yards away, wild-eyed but uninjured. She calmed him enough to mount and then rode hard for town. Sheriff Coleman took one look at her soot-stained face and ash-covered clothes and grabbed his medical bag. "What happened?" "Virgil set fire to our cabin. I shot him. He's alive but wounded." "Christ, All right, let's go. They rode back together, collecting one of the deputies on the way. When they arrived, Rowan had Virgil tied to a tree with rope, the shoulder wound bandaged with strips torn from Rowan's own shirt. He tried to run, Rowan explained. Figured you'd want him secured. Coleman examined Virgil's shoulder. Bullet went clean through. You'll live, Virgil, though you're going to wish you hadn't once we get you to a jail cell. She shot me. Arrest her. For defending her property? I don't think so. You, on the other hand, are looking at arson, attempted murder, trespassing, and probably a dozen other charges I haven't thought of yet. This is bullshit. This is consequences. Something you've avoided your whole life. Not anymore. The deputy helped Virgil onto a horse, and they started back to town. Coleman lingered. You two all right? He asked. We will be, Lydia said, once we rebuild the lean-to and make sure there's no other damage. I'll make sure word gets out about what happened here. Might help with your reputation in town. Some folks have been saying you're troublemakers. Hard to argue that when you're the ones being attacked. Appreciate it, Sheriff. After Coleman left, Lydia and Rowan surveyed the damage. The lean-to was gone. Part of the porch roof was charred. The garden had trampled spots where Virgil had walked through it, but the cabin itself was intact, damaged but standing, like them. I shot my father, Lydia said quietly. You defended yourself. I know, but I still shot him. Regret it? Lydia thought about it, searched her feelings for guilt or remorse, found only relief. No, she said, I don't regret it at all. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human. He tried to kill you. You stopped him. That's not bad. That's survival. Will he go to prison? If there's any justice in the world, yes. And if there's not, then we deal with it, like we've dealt with everything else. Together. Lydia leaned against him, exhausted. I'm so tired of fighting. I know, but you're winning. That counts for something. They stood together in the gathering dusk, looking at their damaged but still standing home. We should get married soon, Lydia said, before anything else happens. How soon? Tomorrow? Rowan laughed. Tomorrow works. Milan. They married 2 days later in a small ceremony at the church in Blackthorn Ridge. Sheriff Coleman gave Lydia away since she had no family willing to do it. A handful of townspeople attended, the shopkeeper, the bartender who'd witnessed the original sale, Sarah Mathis and her sister, a few other women Lydia had helped. Rowan wore his one good shirt. Lydia wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself from fabric he'd bought her months ago. The minister asked if anyone objected. Nobody spoke. Virgil was in a jail cell awaiting trial and couldn't have objected if he'd wanted to. When it was done, when they were officially married, Lydia felt something settle into place, a rightness she'd never experienced before. How does it feel? Rowan asked as they rode back up the mountain together. Like coming home. Like I finally belong somewhere. You do belong. You always have. They spent that night in their rebuilt lean-to under the stars, too happy to care about the cold. Soot watched them with patient horse eyes, probably wondering why humans did such strange things. The next morning, they woke to find a group of people from town waiting at the cabin. They'd brought tools and lumber and supplies. Heard you needed help rebuilding, the shopkeeper said. Figured it was the least we could do. We can't pay you, Rowan said. Didn't ask you to. You've helped enough people in this town. Time we return the favor. They spent the day working together. Men and women from Blackthorn Ridge, who'd decided that maybe standing up to bullies was worth the risk. By evening, the lean-to was fully rebuilt and better than it had been before. As people prepared to leave, Sarah Mathis pulled Lydia aside. I wanted to thank you, she said, for helping me, for showing me it was possible to leave. You did the hard part. I just pointed you in the right direction. It was more than that. You gave me hope. That matters more than you know. After everyone left, Lydia and Rowan sat on their repaired porch and watched the sun set. People are good, Lydia said, when you give them the chance to be. Some people, not all. Enough. Enough people are good that it balances out the bad ones. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? Rowan took her hand. I think you might be right. Patik. Virgil's trial happened in December. Lydia testified about the fire, the threats, the years of abuse. Other women came forward with their own stories. Women who'd known Virgil, who'd seen what he was capable of, who'd stayed silent out of fear. The jury deliberated for 20 minutes, guilty on all counts. Virgil was sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison. He'd be an old man by the time he got out, if he survived that long. Prison wasn't kind to men who hurt women. Lydia felt nothing when she heard the verdict. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet sense of closure. It was over. She walked out of the courthouse with Rowan's hand in hers and didn't look back. Winter settled over the mountain with heavy snow and long nights. Lydia and Rowan spent the time working on the cabin, teaching each other skills, planning for spring. More women came seeking help. They arrived cold and scared and left warmer and stronger. Some stayed a night, some stayed weeks. Each one took a piece of hope with them when they left. By the time spring arrived, the mountain cabin had developed a reputation. It was a place of sanctuary, a place where the broken could heal, where the frightened could find courage. Lydia turned 21 that March. Rowan made her a cake that was lopsided and slightly burnt, and she loved it anyway. "Make a wish," he said. She closed her eyes and thought about what she wanted. A year ago, she would have wished for safety, for enough food, for the nightmares to stop. Now she wished for something different. She wished for the strength to keep helping others, for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to let go, for the love she'd found to continue growing instead of fading. She blew out the candle. "What did you wish for?" Rowan asked. "Can't tell you. It won't come true." "That's superstition." "Maybe, but I'm not taking chances." They ate the burnt cake and laughed about nothing and everything. Outside, the garden was beginning to sprout. The mountains were turning green again. Birds were returning from their winter migrations. Life was happening, real life, not just survival. One evening in late April, Lydia was sitting on the porch reading when she had a sudden thought. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" He looked up from the saddle he was oiling. "I've been thinking about my mother, about how she tried to protect me even when she couldn't protect herself." "Okay." "I think she'd be proud of me, of what I've become, what we've built here." "I think she would too." "I wish she could have seen it, this life, this freedom." "Maybe she does see it, in some way." Lydia smiled. "You believe that?" "I believe that love doesn't end just because life does, that the people we lose stay with us in the choices we make, in the way we treat others. Your mother lives on in you, Lydia, in your kindness, your strength, your refusal to let cruelty win." Tears pricked Lydia's eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. "Thank you for that. It's just the truth." They sat together as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound no longer seemed threatening, just another voice in the wilderness, another survivor calling out to say they were still here, still fighting, still alive. The story of the mountain cabin spread beyond Blackthorn Ridge, beyond the territory. Women traveling through heard about it. Some came seeking help. Others came just to see if it was real, if there really was a place where broken souls could find sanctuary. Lydia welcomed them all. She never turned anyone away, even when supplies ran low, even when the cabin was crowded, even when it would have been easier to say no, because she remembered what it felt like to have nowhere to go, to have no hope, to believe that suffering was simply the price of existence, and she refused to let anyone feel that way if she could prevent it. By summer, Lydia and Rowan had established a network. Women who'd found safety helped others find it too. Sarah Mathis opened her sister's home to women fleeing abuse. Martha, the older woman from November, started a boarding house specifically for women in transition. The shopkeeper in town began quietly directing women to the mountain cabin. It wasn't perfect. Some women went back to their abusers. Some situations ended badly. Some people couldn't be saved no matter how hard Lydia tried. But some could be. And that was enough. One evening in July, Rowan found Lydia in the garden, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's why I'm crying. I don't understand. A year ago, I was starving and beaten and being sold like livestock. I thought my life was over, that I'd never be anything more than a victim." She looked at him, her face wet with tears. "And now look at me. I'm married to a good man. I have a home. I can read and write. I'm helping people. I matter. My life matters. How did I get so lucky? It wasn't luck. It was choices. You chose to survive. You chose to grow. You chose to help others instead of letting pain make you cruel." "We chose," Lydia corrected. "You chose to help me when you didn't have to. That started everything. Then we chose together, and we'll keep choosing every day." Lydia stood and pulled him into a hug. They stood there in the garden, surrounded by growing things, surrounded by possibility. "I love this life," she whispered. "Me too. I love you. I love you too." By the time fall arrived again, marking a full year since Lydia had come to the mountain, the cabin had become something of a legend. The place where broken women went to be whole again. The place where the impossible became possible. Lydia had changed too. The frightened girl was gone entirely, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength, who could stand in front of a crowd and speak about survival without shame, who could look at her scars, physical and emotional, and see them not as marks of victimhood, but as proof of resilience. She'd learned that healing wasn't linear, that there were still bad days when old ghosts returned, that recovery was a journey, not a destination. But she'd also learned that she was stronger than her trauma, that love was real, that kindness mattered, that one person could make a difference, even if that difference was small. On the anniversary of the day Rowan had bought her freedom, they stood together at the edge of the clearing and looked at everything they'd built. The rebuilt cabin, sturdy and warm, the flourishing garden, the network of women helping women, the proof that broken things could be mended. "Do you ever think about that day?" Lydia asked. "When you saw my father trying to sell me?" "Every day." "Do you regret it, any of it?" Rowan turned to look at her. "Lydia, buying you was the best decision I ever made. Not because I bought you, that still makes me sick, but because it brought you into my life, because it gave both of us a chance at something better. I'm glad you were there that day. I'm glad you were the one who found me. I'm glad you let me find you." They stood together in the fading light, two people who'd saved each other without really meaning to. Two people who'd built something beautiful out of ashes and pain. The mountain watched over them, silent and eternal. The wind whispered through the pines. The creek sang its endless song. And in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not without scars, not without the memory of suffering, but whole, real, worth fighting for. Lydia thought about all the women who would come after her, all the scared girls who would walk up this mountain trail looking for hope, all the broken souls who would find sanctuary in these walls. She thought about her mother, who'd taught her to be kind even when the world was cruel, who'd planted seeds of strength that had taken years to bloom. She thought about Rowan, who'd shown her that not all men were monsters, that gentleness was possible, that love didn't have to hurt. And she thought about herself, about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, about the journey between the two. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan asked. "Everything, nothing. How grateful I am, how lucky we are. We make our own luck. Maybe, or maybe luck is just being in the right place at the right time with the right person. Then I guess I'm the luckiest man alive." Lydia smiled and leaned into him. "We both are." They stayed there until the stars came out, two survivors who'd refused to stay broken, two fighters who'd chosen love over bitterness, two people who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge against a cruel world is simply living well in spite of it. The mountain had changed them both. Lydia had arrived broken and left whole. Rowan had arrived lonely and found purpose. Together they'd built something that would outlast them both. A legacy of hope. A proof that people could change. That trauma didn't have to define you. That the end of one story could be the beginning of another. And in the silence of the mountain night, surrounded by wilderness and possibility, they understood something fundamental and true. They had survived. They were surviving. They would continue to survive. Not just existing, not just enduring, but truly, fully, completely living. And that made every hard moment, every painful memory, every difficult choice worth it. Because this, standing together under the stars, building a life worth living, helping others find their own strength, this was what it meant to be human. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but the choice to keep going despite it. the decision to make meaning from suffering, the courage to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Lydia Creed, formerly Lydia Voss, had learned that lesson the hard way. But she'd learned it, and she would spend the rest of her life teaching it to anyone who needed to hear it. The mountain had given her that gift, and she would pay it forward, one broken soul at a time, for as long as she had breath in her body. Because that was what survivors did. They survived, and then they helped others survive too. And in doing so, they transformed survival into something greater, into hope, into healing, into home.